Welcome, everybody. How you doing? Doug Barry here. I appreciate you joining me. Well, we got riots in LA. We got to talk about that a little bit. We got to talk about diabolical disorientation, really what that might mean for us. Let's take a look here, what we're seeing going on in the streets of LA right now. If you aren't caught up to speed with this all started several days ago when the legal warrants were being served on some illegal immigrants out there. Now, this obviously erupted into some serious protests and eventually became very violent. Rocks, stones, fires, federal agents being attacked, law enforcement dealing with just crazy, outrageous individuals who really want to cause trouble. Now, whether we get into debate or not, and maybe we won't get into that so much about whether or not the way the Trump administration is handling this is good. I think it's important to understand there is a rule of law that must be enforced here. When you've got illegal immigrants out there and you have a lot of violent offenders even in that illegal immigrant crowd, such as rapists, murderers, child pornographers, human traffickers, and all this has been absolutely recorded as being true. Those are the ones that they're going after first and foremost. And in the process, you have those out there who simply want to cause trouble. And they want this to become a reason for more violence and chaos in the streets. This is a difficult thing, I think, for some people to understand, especially, you live in the Christian world, Christian mindset. You just have a hard time sometimes accepting the fact that there are people out there that just want to watch the world burn. That's scriptural. There are people that want to do evil just for the sake of doing evil. Now, I know there are people out there who will look at these situations like this. We see cars on fire. We see police being attacked. We see the riot, the riot gear. We see the National Guard now has been called out. That happened a while back. So we've got all of this. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, has said that he's got at least 500 Marines ready to go to be deployed if it gets that nasty. Now, why would this all be happening? Because there is a real breakdown, a disorientation, a diabolical disorientation that has been unfolding for quite some time now. The term diabolical disorientation really kind of became much more recognized, well known from Sister Lucia, the third longest living seer of the Fatima apparitions in 1917, when she said in a conversation with someone that there would be a diabolical disorientation that would affect many people in the world. And the Blessed Mother was asking us to pray the rosary so that we would be prepared to handle the diabolical disorientation. You see these images on the screen, and these are just a handful. You can go out and find them yourself. I'm sure many of you have already seen them. This is really unfolding into much more serious chaos. You think back to the George Floyd riots, when Minneapolis, for example, was lit on fire. And much of it, by the way, has never been repaired, has never been rebuilt. And even when President Trump offered to send in troops, the governor said no. And then it really just devolved into the mess that it became. A lot of people were hurt, a lot of property utterly, completely destroyed. We don't even know all the crimes that were committed because not everything was reported. I'm sure you got gangs running in streets, just anarchists causing all kinds of trouble. And President Trump does not want to allow that to happen again. So he has called out the National Guard. Again, I will always say, and I've said this before, there are two main things that keep a society from completely falling apart. The first thing is every individual has a moral fiber that God has given us. Some of that moral fiber for many just doesn't exist. For some people, moral fiber is just not even a part of their lives. It's completely gone. It's eroded. That general sense of being a decent person alone, let alone trying to be a godly, truly holy person. But a decent person that doesn't take advantage of others, that doesn't loot when there's a storm, a hurricane, or situations like this, when people are scared and they're running. That decent person who doesn't just all of a sudden follow the mob that wants to get into violence and burning things and creating chaos and havoc just for the sake of creating chaos and havoc. That decent person that just knows you treat other people well because they're human and they deserve that. They have a dignity. When that fiber is gone, that moral fiber is gone, then you have one other thing that really keeps society from collapsing, as we're seeing in LA right now, and we've seen many times over the years in different places, especially during the George Floyd riots. You have rule of law and the enforcement of that rule of law that has to be in place. It has to be in place, otherwise you're going to have more chaos. Look, we know that one of the reasons that President Trump was even elected was because we needed the borders to be more secure. We needed to take MS-13 and Tren de Aragua gang members off the streets. We needed to remove those that were involved in human trafficking. We need to be better prepared. Now, we've been warned about all this many, many times over from heaven. I'm doing a webinar next week, 2 free webinars on June 11th and 12th, Wednesday, June 11th at 7 p.m. Central, and on the 12th, Thursday, the 12th at 1 p.m. Central. And this is about the warnings of the Blessed Mother, the warnings and the messages, and really how they apply to us right now. Not something that has already happened. We look at situations like Fatima in 1917, when we were told that there'd be a second world war, and it happened. But that message of Fatima is not over. It was a message of the need for conversion. So we're going to break this down in detail. We're going to talk about Fatima, a key to Japan. We'll talk about Our Lady of America. We'll talk about Medjugorje, Garabandal. We're going to go through a lot of these and break them down. And in some ways, they'll be from an angle I think some of you might not have considered. Many of you know a lot about the Marian apparitions, and that's amazing and that's excellent. But there are some things we all need, I think, to look at more deeply. I've been talking about them for over 35 years of my life, and I'm still learning beautiful pieces about these messages from heaven. So please go out to brcoalition.com/sign up. Free webinars next week, June 11th and June 12th, Wednesday at 7 p.m. on the 11th, Thursday at 1 p.m. Central, both Central Time, on June 12th. Check that out, brcoalition.com/sign up. Link is in the description below. Just click that link. It'll take you right out there. Diabolical disorientation, though, and the LA riots. Some would say, well, this is clearly an act of diabolical disorientation. And in some ways, I would have to agree, because we're seeing things that simply don't make sense. I think one of the greatest, probably tell signs of some sort of diabolical disorientation is the fact that some of this just is completely outside the realm of logic. If you looked at the trajectory of this, where do you see this go? Well, you've got Governor Newsom, and you've got Mayor Bass, you got other politicians out there, even Harris, Kamala Harris has chimed in on this, several others, Hakeem Jeffries and so forth. They've all spoken out in different ways that are going after the administration, Trump administration, for trying to enforce the rule of law, saying that it's causing more of the trouble. Even the president of Mexico, Sheinbaum, has come out and applauds what she refers to as heroes, those who are resisting in LA. And she says these people, many of the immigrants in America, have left Mexico for a better life. First of all, that kind of says something about the way she's running Mexico, but that's a whole nother conversation. But she says they're just up there to live a better life. This is not the way to handle it. The way to handle this would be for the people who come into this country to follow the rule of law. And when law enforcement goes after, especially those they're serving warrants on, who are involved in serious crime, like running drugs or guns or human trafficking and things such as that, they need to be arrested. They need to be taken care of, because they are a danger to society anywhere in the world. And every country has the right to protect their people. Anyway, getting back to the whole point about the diabolical disorientation, we've seen this lack of logic, this lack of common sense, this disoriented way of thinking show its ugly head in many different areas of our society over recent years. Look what happened with the pandemic, when certain things just didn't make sense, but people kept going along with it. This was worldwide as well. When we saw the George Floyd riots and things just completely, utterly destroyed, which was interesting in the George Floyd riots, where you had some, primarily on the left, who were making the argument that these riots could take place and people could gather at a time when they were telling us we needed 6-foot distance, right? Social distancing and masks. They were telling us that was the absolute necessity. And yet, when the riots broke out and things were being destroyed and burned, set on fire, statues being torn down, drugged through streets, thrown into rivers and such, when all that was going on, it was okay. Some were saying it was actually healthier for us to get this out of our systems than it was to social distance and keep it all pinned up inside. Unbelievable craziness when it comes to trying to find logic in these things. But remember this, evil will always mitigate itself to the level of absurdity. Many exorcists have used that type of expression to explain evil reaches a point of simply not making any sense whatsoever. And those are the times when we know absolutely what we're dealing with. And so when you see these types of disoriented actions in the streets, such as in LA right now, anybody in their right mind's got to realize that just setting cars on fire, throwing rocks at law enforcement. I mean, there's one video out there of police cars trying to get under an overpass, because from the overpass, a crowd is throwing cinder blocks and rocks and chunks of concrete at these squad cars, disabling some of them, shattering their windshields with human lives inside, law enforcement. And yet it goes on and on. And what does the governor say? What does the mayor say? They're not siding with so much protecting our people. They're not. What they're doing is they're siding more with the illegal situation and the rioters simply by their behavior of not joining forces with the administration that wants to bring law and order. Even by bringing the National Guard in, they are saying something to the criminals. They're saying that, you know what, you can resist authority. We're doing it. We're resisting federal authority here. We're resisting federal law that gives the president permission to do this. The point I'm getting at here is we see the breakdown in the fiber of every individual that's out there causing any kind of chaos or havoc in the streets. We also see it when it comes to those who want to disrupt even religion, even faith, when they want to bring into religious practices things that are irreverent, unholy, when we want to contradict the true teachings of God in the Catholic faith, for example, and we want to bring into the celebration of the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass things that are completely contrary to what the sacrifice of the Mass is supposed to be about. I'm not going to get into the details of that. Those weeds right there, a lot of people are debating and discussing out there, but I think it's pretty apparent out there. We can see pretty clearly when there is an effort to undermine. I'll never forget the video that I saw after the Holy Sacrifice of the Mass, after the celebration of the Mass, Holy Communion in particular. And people were still settling down and meditating on receiving Jesus in Holy Communion. This was a very kind of rambunctious celebration of the Mass. This was years ago. Someone comes in. This is part of the Mass with a basketball coming down the aisle, and then they started tossing the ball around up near the altar as part of the celebration. This was something that was approved and accepted. When we see those types of things, you got to scratch your head and wonder, where's the holiness and reverence here? That's part of the disorientation. So you can find it across the board. I don't see it just as in the violence of these scenes that we're seeing on screen right now. I see it also in the mindset of people who have simply accepted certain things that are absolutely, unequivocally disordered, like the pronoun situation, or biological men competing in women's sports and going into women's locker rooms, and so forth and so forth. Right? Human trafficking, all types of things. Abortion in and of itself has a form of disorientation that is incredibly diabolical, no question about it. And the fact that there are people out there who would support it, who would encourage it. Or how about this? People that claim to be faithful and holy and religious leaders and not speak out against these things as clearly and as boldly as they absolutely should. Is that not a form of some disorientation of the truth in someone's heart? We could go on with this and really, really make clear the fact that we are living in a time right now where we're seeing things that are upside down. You can go back 50, 60, 70 years. Remember the Leave It to Beaver type time when there was a certain order in a family. I'm not saying everything was perfect, no. But what we're saying is what we see now is completely off the wall. When 50, 60, 70 years ago, the greatest problem in school was chewing gum or maybe smoking a cigarette in the bathroom. And now what do we have? We have students who have to go to school and walk through metal detectors. That's been going on for years. We have to worry about rape in schools. We have to worry about violence in schools on a whole different degree. And we've got students out there that are learning next to nothing in many of our schools these days. Their reading tests and math tests are at all-time lows in some areas. These are things we would never have considered would happen, especially in a country as powerful as America. But worldwide, we see a disorientation happening too, when we see all the different things happening across the globe that are just so completely upside down. What's the remedy to all this? I'm going to get back to why we're doing these webinars next week. There's an absolute essential call right now to every single one of us to respond to the messages of our Blessed Mother. There's a reason why heaven has been crying this out for so many years. We go back to Fatima alone, but we can go back to La Salette in France, when the image of Our Lady in La Salette that we see, the statues and the images that the two children recorded, she's got her face buried in her hands, weeping. Why does Our Lady do this? Why does she say in Akita, Japan in 1973 that the cause of my great sadness is the loss of so many souls? And a statue, a miracle of a statue, the statue of Our Lady of All Nations in the convent in Akita, Japan, weeps 101 times, as well as perspires and had the stigmata wound in the hand bleeding. Why does Our Lady show this? In many other images, statues, and pictures across the world where we have seen tears coming from the eyes. We've seen perspiration coming from the statues of our Lord and Our Lady all over the world. Why? because there is a message being sent to us of the seriousness of our times. brcoalition.com/sign up. I beg you, go out there, sign up for this free webinar. Let's get into this next week more in detail and talk about what we could be doing right now. Again, we should be praying the rosary every day. That's a no-brainer. Why do we know that? Because Our Lady has said this over and over and over again. We have to remember that praying the rosary, going to mass, going to confession, going to adoration, fasting, these types of things, these things aren't necessarily because God needs them. Sometimes I think people fall into this idea that, well, I'm praying this because God needs me to pray. We need to pray. As the saying goes, God didn't give us the Sabbath for him. He gave us the Sabbath for us, because we need to make sure that once a week we are reconnecting with God in a deep way through honoring what the holy sacrifice of the Mass is on Sunday, Sunday obligation, and so forth. We need this. So when Our Lady says, pray this rosary every day, it's not because she needs us to pray this rosary. We need this, and we need the transformation to happen in our hearts and in our minds. Again, next week, June 11th and 12th, Wednesday the 11th at 7 p.m. and Thursday the 12th at 1 p.m., both Central Time. Free webinar, brcoalition.com/sign up. Click the link in the description. Go on out there, sign up for the free webinar, and let's get together and talk more in detail about these particular messages and apparitions and what it means for our times right now. And when we see this disorientation going on in our world, whether it's chaos, the riots in LA, and the interaction between politicians and officials, and just how just unreasonable so much of it seems to be, when they say that they want to side and in some ways actually allow some of this protest to go on in such violent ways. When we see that sort of thing, or we see even those who become so disoriented that they don't even think they need to go to Mass on Sundays. Third commandment. That's a type of disorientation too, when you don't think that you need to follow the laws of God anymore and you think you're going to be fine with that. We could go across the board on all of this. When we see this kind of disorder and disorientation, and we see it escalating in these ways, we need to remember that heaven has already told us what the peace plan is and the things that we need to be doing, the way we need to be looking at this. So again, join us next week at the time I record this, next week for the, actually, no, we're talking about 2 days. Forgive me, at the time we record this, 2 days from now. Yeah, coming up Wednesday, Thursday. Go out there right now, sign up, brcoalition.com/sign up. In 2 days, we'll have our first webinar. I look forward to seeing you all then. All right. Keep praying, because things are still unfolding and things are still getting crazy. So God bless and strengthen you. Go out, click that link in the description, and I look forward to seeing you in the webinar in just a couple of days. Take care.